Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of February. February was a pretty crazy month for me in terms of just things that I had to get done, specifically with work, which will transition over to March, I would presume. However, I did actually end up reading 5 books. So the 5th book, I read the last 20 pages in March 1st. So technically I read most of it in February, and I finished it before filming this video. So I'm going to count it towards February, although technically it is a March read. You know what I mean? So the first book that I read in the month of February was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is the first book in a YA historical fiction fantasy series that is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in Shanghai in the 1920s. This obviously follows our characters Roma and Juliet, and they are on opposite sides of a mob war. This book I read specifically because it is in my 10 books that I want to read by the end of 2024. I am very glad that I read this one. I gave this book a solid 4 stars. This I felt was really well done. It had the same vibes as The Diviners in the beginning, because there is this sort of monstrous epidemic sort of thing happening that they have to work together in order to solve, because both sides of this mob war are being affected by it. And I thought that the creepiness and the monstrous abilities very much reminded me of The Diviners, and also because it's set in 1920s. But this one was, like I said, pretty well done. I especially really liked the Romeo and Juliet retelling parts of it. The balcony scene, for instance, is actually really cleverly done, and I thought it fit really well with the book without making it too on the nose. Another thing that I really appreciated was the subtlety of some of the diverse characters. It does mention that one of the characters in this is trans, and there is insinuations that there is a gay couple in this book. And it also talks about the different caste systems within China at this time, as well as the racial differences between someone that was born in China and stays in China versus someone born in China and then goes to the US and then comes back. The only thing that I really didn't like that kept it from being a 5 stars was actually the romance between Roma and Juliet. Roma and Juliet in this book have been stated that they had a previous relationship when they were both really young, and now they're back when they're older, and then the relationship kind of goes from there. But we never really saw that much of the relationship previously. Obviously it's fine because it's in the past, but it didn't feel as believable. It felt like something was off between them, and I still enjoyed them, and I still think that they are a really good couple, but I thought that it could have been done better. And then Randomathon started, and I read 2.5 books for that. The half book will be shown in my March wrap up because I am not done with it yet. But the first book that I read for that was Delilah Dawson's Midnight at the Houdini. This is the group book for the readathon, and this book I ended up giving 3 stars. This follows our main character Anna after her sister got married, and so she is returning back to the hotel. However, a tornado comes and she is thrust into having to take shelter at her dad's hotel that she never really knew of, which is the Houdini. The Houdini has magical properties where once you enter, you cannot escape if you stay through to midnight. And so this follows her trying to escape the Houdini. And there she meets a boy named Max who is trying to help her escape while also trying to escape himself from the curse. And like I said, I gave this book 3 stars. It was fine. I loved the atmosphere of this book, and I also really loved the magical elements to it. The Houdini itself is pretty much a character. They say that it can change rooms and it can switch things up. It can give you what you desire in terms of random things. So she really wishes that this library has a book, for instance, and so then the next time they revisit it, the book is there, and things like that I found really cool. However, my problem with it was that I really didn't like Anna and Max together as a couple. Anna is very much in her own head. She is dealing with a lot of family issues because she didn't want her sister to get married and move far away, and Max having pretty much no social skills because he's been raised in this hotel is just immediately infatuated with her, and I felt like that they didn't really explain that very well. These are you know, two people that have never really met anyone of their own age of the opposite gender. Why there should be a romance after this, I don't really understand. And also, like, would they actually be your soulmate? I don't think so, because they're the first person that you met. And so it was just kind of like, for me. I also really did not like the multiple perspectives of this. There are several of them that are all throughout, and I only really truly cared about Anna and Max, and also Max's mother, who's seen in this book. The rest of them I could care less about. So it was just kind of frustrating for that. I also thought that the ending was a little bit rushed, a little too convenient. The Houdini itself is not fully explained. I do kind of understand the origins of the curse and stuff. That's very much thought of. But why does the Houdini have these magical properties, and how does it get them, that kind of thing? I wanted more info about. So 3 stars, it was fine. And then the next book that I read for Randomathon was Almost Flying by Maia, Arlow. This was actually a very recent purchase. I think I got this either at the beginning of the year or late last year. And I am so glad that I read it for Randomathon. This follows our main character, Dahlia. She is in the summer before 8th grade, and she is going through a lot of changes because her best friend dumped her for popular girls, and she meets a new girl that comes into town and joins her swim club, and so she is really liking their friendship, but it might be something more to her. And her father, on top of all of this, has decided that he has a girlfriend that he's never told her about, and then on top of that, that they're getting married, and that she's going to have a new sister. And as a way to bond, the parents force them to go on this epic cross-country quest to go to a bunch of amusement parks that her soon-to-be sister was previously planning, and so she kind of like crashes it with her and her friend. And this was so good. I think this is the first middle grade that I've read this year, and I am so glad that I read this. This was absolutely perfection. I give this 5 out of 5 stars. There are so many different layers to the story, right? Because there's her losing her friend, her gaining a new friend, but also might having a crush on her, and then also the dynamics of all of the family things that are happening. And they're so well done in this book. They're so well explained. They never felt like one was given less time than the other. It was also such a very fun summer read. I really wanted to go to an amusement park after reading this because of the main character, Dahlia really wants to go on a roller coaster. That's like her big plan for this summer. So she's actually kind of happy about the fact that she crashes this amusement park road trip. And since she loves roller coasters so much, she has this vast knowledge of them. She watches like YouTube POVs, and she knows all these fun facts. I thought that all of the characters were beautifully done and well fleshed out. The character's soon-to-be sister also brings her best friend along, and I thought that both of them were so good. They also worked perfectly together. They were such a dynamic duo, honestly, that I thought perfectly complemented the 2 little girls that were going along on the trip. I don't know. Everything about this just really felt right for me, and it did have some sentimental moments to it. It's also kind of a coming-of-age story, and it just was great. I really recommend it. This is one of my favorite books now, and I am so glad I read it. I highly recommend it to anyone that wants to check it out. And the other thing that I really loved about this book is also the fact that, as I said, all the stories are really well balanced, but I also think that all of the other characters in this have subtle stories in their own that are well done as well and incorporated into it, which don't feel overpowering. So this was just perfection. And another 5-star read, which was not for Randomathon, this was after Randomathon, was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This is a world where fairies exist, and so Emily Wilde is a professor of fairies, and she is currently working on an encyclopedia of fairies, which has never been done before, and she's almost done with her book, but she has one part left to go, and that is to look at and try to find information about the hidden ones, which are these group of fairies that may or may not exist in Lostlander. And so she goes on this epic journey to try to figure out some information for her book. And then, unfortunately for her co-worker, academic rival, Bamblebee, joins in on helping her out, which she is not very thrilled with. And that's the story. The most entertaining boring story I've ever read. Now, what does that mean? It is pretty slow, and there's not a whole lot going on in this story. It's just as you imagine. This is exactly what you think it is. It's Emily Wilde just doing some anthropological research. It's not going to work for everyone, and I do understand why people don't like this book, because it is, in fact, quite slow. But I thought it was perfect because I was a double major for history and anthropology, and so this was just so up my alley. I loved the little aspects of historical folklore involved. I loved the anthropological research that Emily Wilde goes through and how she does it. I found it very much on par with real anthropological research and how it's done. And I also just really loved the academic banter between her and Bamblebee, and I can totally understand all of her stress and desire to report well and write a good book as she tries to hopefully secure tenure at her college. It was just delightfully cozy and simple. If you have read Legends of Latte, this felt very similar because of the fact that it's just a simple story. There's not very high stakes in this. It's just, it is what it is. I'm intrigued. I'm very excited for the sequel. I might have to pick it up very soon because I really loved this one, and I want to see what happens next with them, especially since like at this book it doesn't leave off on a cliffhanger, but there is room for growth, and so I want to see what happens after that, because there is this like separate storyline that I can't tell you about that isn't quite wrapped up. The last book that I read for the month of February was Lady Tan's Circle of Women by Lisa C. This is a historical fiction novel following our main character, Lady Tan, as she is in the Ming Dynasty in China, and she is a doctor, or at least she's been taught to be a doctor, and it's just her journey through life as she is a young girl and then all the way through to old age, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So I really loved all of the medical portions of this book. She has learned from her grandmother that women are physically and mentally and emotionally very different from men, and so male doctors treating women just doesn't really work out that well, and so her grandmother kind of teaches her the right way to be like a female doctor, and she forms this unlikely bond with a midwife's daughter. Really, honestly, kind of a love story between the two friends, and as they continue and grow old together and the different things that happen, she gets married to a well-off family, for instance, and her friend ends up getting married to a merchant, and so they live very drastically different lives, but it seems like at one point her friend's happier than her, and all of just the different layers between economics and caste. And they're also occupations, because she very much becomes basically just a wife, and she wants to practice medicine but doesn't know how. And then her friend becomes a midwife, and it becomes prestigious and all of these things too. And I thought that this was super good. I, like I said, really loved the medical portions of this. I thought they were really well done. The one thing that I would recommend, though, is that there is a lot of conversations about blood and death and some gory scenes. And there's also a lot of weird conversations about like foot binding and stuff that might be a little too much for some people, so please take note of that. There's a lot of like medical things in this that I know some people would not enjoy. I don't read too much historical fiction, but I do find that I really enjoy the historical fiction that I do read, like this, and so this just fit everything for me. And I do really love also following a character as they grow old, like throughout their whole life. But I do have to say that this one, as she enters like the elderly age, there's sort of like this little wrap up, and I thought that it didn't necessarily need to happen. I thought that at the end of her like adulthood stage that would have been a perfectly fine ending. I also was more interested in the beginning years of her story, and then also like midway through her adulthood, as opposed to like her once she gets married. It's just kind of like and also the hairpin age, which is like when you're a teen and when she's about to get married. I felt like that was a bit rushed, which I understand due to the pacing, and it probably didn't matter as much in terms of like what actually happened to her, but I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. So I give this like a 4-star. I honestly feel like it might be a little higher than a 4-star, but definitely not a 4.5. So like if I really did like specific star ratings, maybe like a 4.25, if that makes sense. So that is it, guys, for this video. Comment down below if you guys have read any of these books. If not, what was your favorite read of the month of February? And I will hopefully see you guys in the next one. Bye!